turn all the ministers to your side.
That was the condition the queen had set for Krang. She said they could discuss the throne after fulfilling that condition. The queen said so, and Krang obeyed.
Your Majesty.
Krang looked at the queen. The queen also looked at Krang. Enkrid didn't know, but the queen had no desire for the throne. She didn't crave power either. What she wanted was to live a quiet, peaceful life. Her dream was to see flowers in the spring, to find shade under trees in the summer, and cool off while chatting. In autumn, she wanted to gather fallen leaves, and in winter she wished to sip warm tea while watching the snow fall outside her window. It would be even better if a good person were by her side during all those moments. In other words, what she truly wished for wasn't a marriage made to maintain the throne, but to spend time with someone she truly liked. For an ordinary commoner, such a dream would have seemed extravagant, but she was the queen of Narilia, so it could be considered a humble dream. The person who was queen didn't suit the throne. She desired something other than power, and yet she stayed. She didn't avoid responsibility. She did what she could. At one point, she even considered handing over power to the noble families, including the Visar family, and leaving.
If you do that now, Narilia will be divided into at least 3 parts. Oh, and those 3 will either be annexed by other nations or collapse. The part that survives might just become a city-state. But what are you going to do about that?
That was the voice of Marquis Visar, her mentor. He was right. A queen was like the last bastion against the most ambitious of the powerful. She couldn't leave, but she didn't want to hand the throne over to someone like Count Molson either.
My late father.
Sometimes there were nights when she missed her father. The gift from the late king had arrived.
Kadianath Rangdius Nauril, that's supposed to be my name.
It was like seeing her father as a child. There were many similarities between them. Krang sought out the queen before everything began. Krang had to see the queen. He had to know if Narilia was a country worth protecting and living for. If it wasn't, he shouldn't even start.
The late king was full of love.
That was the queen's first words when she met Krang. It was sincere. The late king had many women. Even with a queen and concubines, he often wandered. It was surprising that there was only one illegitimate child. The two had conversations. Afterward, Krang left and returned, seeing the queen again, leading to this moment.
Did you ask the question?
The queen had said there was one more person left to ask the question to. No matter her dreams, the queen loved the kingdom where she was born and raised. That's why she didn't turn away from her responsibility. There were 3 people she intended to ask. One was, of course, Krang. The second was Marquis Visar. She had thought about slowly transferring the throne after raising him to the rank of Grand Duke, but her mentor had refused, so there was nothing she could do. After that, she had also considered putting the Marquis of Octo on the list, but Marquis Visar opposed that as well.
No matter what, it will lead to ruin.
Marquis Visar knew that the country needed a universally acknowledged focal point to be maintained. The Queen's last question had to be directed at Count Molson. If he truly cared for the country, then shouldn't she hand over the throne, even to a man with a tongue as slippery as a ghoul's? Doing things she hated had long since become her specialty, but she couldn't even ask the question.
How ridiculous.
Just before answering, the Queen thought that to herself. She really had become ridiculous. She had tried to ask, but only one person remained to be questioned. The 2 grand nobles, once revered, had already sided with Krang, and the only other person who could have been questioned, Count Molson, had become a rebel himself. Count Molson was a man who could be called a hero, and yet,
I can't say that was the right way.
what he desires is the throne, not the kingdom. The Queen saw that clearly. Thus, only one option remained.
Was it intentional?
The Queen asked. Krang smiled with his eyes.
I only believe that the ones left would be those who love and wish to protect the kingdom.
In the end, it was Krang's game. He had won over the Marquis of Octo, and had already concluded his discussions with Marquis Visar. In any case, if he survived, he had told them to stand behind him then. Marquis Visar bent one knee. His old knee made a soft thud as it touched the ground.
May this old man speak a word?
The Queen nodded. With his head still bowed, the Marquis spoke.
May your dream come true, Your Majesty.
He was someone who had spent more time with the Queen than the late king had. It wouldn't be wrong to call him another father. The Queen did not respond. She simply looked at Krang with an expressionless gaze, betraying no emotion. Krang had proven himself. Beyond in the cleverness of his methods, It was obvious at a glance that every remaining minister in the royal court was on his side.
Protect the kingdom from external threats and punish the traitors. If you do that, I will personally place the crown upon your head.
The queen declared. Enkrid knew that Krang had done all kinds of things to achieve this. There was no way such a conclusion would have been reached otherwise. Most of all, he could tell that Krang and the queen had already finished their discussions.
This is something he began with the promise of the throne.
Fulfill your duty.
Krang said as he turned to leave.
So I shall now go and do what you must.
The queen stood up and called out. Krang bowed and turned away. Marquis Vizar and the Marquis of Octo followed behind him. Enkrid, too, exited with his group. Just before stepping out, Enkrid looked back. He saw the queen extending her hand to the woman who seemed to be a court wizard. It was a gesture of concern, asking if she was okay. The wizard waved her hand dismissively. Was it just his imagination, or was there something more between them? Enkrid thought it was none of his business to know.
Where have you been?
He asked Esther.
Some guy tried to persuade me to join his side.
There was no need to ask who. It was Count Molson. Just as he said, it would have been a wizard trying to sway her. Enkrid thought it wouldn't have been surprising if Esther had left, but she stayed. Should he ask why? Even if he did, it didn't seem like he'd get a proper answer. Just because? Or was it simply a whim? Still, he wanted to ask.
Why didn't you go?
Esther turned her head at his question. She had just come from burning 2 half-witted wizards who were mumbling spells, turning them into ash.
I don't usually listen to others very well,
she said. Enkrid thought, considering that statement, she seemed to listen to his requests quite often. Krang walked slowly, talking with the 2 marquises. They exchanged words about promises, conditions, and what Count Molson might do next. They also discussed how to defend the capital using the forces the 2 marquises had at their disposal. Ingis was with them as well.
Your Highness, I have forces with me that came from the south,
he said. Without even a moment of hesitation, Krang responded without pausing for breath.
I'll give you a few fine horses. Recover from your fatigue briefly, and then it would be best to return.
He still wore his ever-present smile. Was the Count's army not even a threat? The forces that had just arrived were certainly significant, but Krang told them to return. Ingis seemed to be considering something, and was about to speak when Krang spoke first.
Defend against the threats in the south. That is your duty.
Ingis agreed. They had bought about 3 days, but if there was nothing to be done here, they would have to return. Stop Count Molson? Ingis thought that wasn't his task, but from Frankras's perspective, excluding someone as strong as Ingis must have required a big decision, right? Surely, it must have, and yet there was no hesitation. Is this what they call leadership? Even the master had said something similar.
It's a shame to see a vessel like that break. Go and help him.
Wasn't that why Ingis had come all this way, following his master's words? Enkrid, listening to Krang's words from behind, felt a bit disappointed. But there was nothing that could be done.
Should I suggest sparring before I leave?
No, that wouldn't work. Enkrid wasn't Rem. He knew how to discern situations. He was someone who had rushed here from the southern battlefield, unable even to wipe the bloodstains off his armor. Knowing the exhaustion and fatigue, it was something he shouldn't do. If anyone else knew what Enkrid was thinking, they might tilt their head in confusion, but Enkrid knew when to step in and when to step back. That's why, just moments ago, he hadn't interrupted until Krang spoke.
Enki, I've heard the border guard is under threat. You can head back immediately as well.
Krang said from the front. Enkrid nodded and replied.
It should be fine even if I don't go back.
Auden and Kreis are at the border guard. If it were really a dangerous situation, they would have sent word by now. Even if all the scouts had been blocked, would there be no one capable of getting a message through? It's Kreis we're talking about. He surely would have found dozens of ways to handle things. Besides, with Auden and Teresa there, even a junior knight like the one who tried to block Enkrid wouldn't stand a chance. How many knights of that skill level would be capable of stopping him? That junior knight had been undeniably skilled. The only issue was Ragna showing up. If there was anyone who could match Ragna in a fight right now, it would likely be Auden.
I should be worrying about those who deserve it.
And behind Auden was the scheming Kreis. After giving that answer, the eyes of the 2 marquises turned to Enkrid.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Enkrid casually asked back, his tone indifferent, as if he really didn't understand. The expressions of the two marquises were strange. The Marquis of Octo blinked, while Marquis Visar's lips trembled slightly, though his face remained expressionless. It was because of the informal speech. Seeing this, Krang chuckled and said,
Let it go. Didn't I say we're friends?
Your Highness, your dignity may be damaged. Others may take it the wrong way.
Both marquises had already pledged their loyalty to Krang, and their words were appropriate. But their opponent was none other than Krang.
If my dignity can be diminished by just a few words or by the words of a friend I've made personally, then there is nothing more I as a person can do.
A king must maintain his dignity. A king must place everyone beneath him. A king must stand alone, high above all others. But is that the only way to prove oneself as a king? Krang's words were like a question thrown out to the world. Even in this moment, he revealed his intentions and showed his character. He was different. The weight of his words showed that he wasn't like ordinary men. The heavy atmosphere quickly dissipated.
What if I scold Enki for his bluntness, and he decides to switch sides to the enemy?
Krang said playfully. The two marquises' faces twisted awkwardly. They knew of Enkrid's skills. They also knew about the madmen platoon under his command. If they lost them now, who knew what would happen in the battle against Count Molson? They couldn't just call upon the knights after all. Well, if they pushed it, they could. Perhaps Sir Cyprus would come, even from the south. Krang knew this too, but despite that, he decided not to summon them. What mattered wasn't the immediate situation. Preventing civil war was just one step in the process. Krang believed he needed to handle things this way for the sake of the kingdom after he claimed the throne. The first reason was that if they couldn't defend against the southern nation of Rienstetten or the Demon Realm, they would be unable to recover from the damage. The second reason was,
If I don't keep my own word, who will follow me?
he had fought Count Molson with words. When they couldn't reach a clear victory, Enkrid had lent his support. It was a ridiculous situation, but one thing was clear. When words weren't enough, they had to settle it through action. So he had to manage without the knights. Krang believed it had to be this way.
You'll help, right?
Krang asked with a playful tone, and Enkrid nodded. The two marquises watched Krang and Enkrid, realizing they were of a different caliber. It made sense. By now the moon had risen high in the sky, and moonlight streamed in through the windows leading outside the royal hall. The fighting had seemingly settled down as there were no more chaotic sounds. A group of royal guards approached, but then stopped. The one in the lead wore a dark gray helmet.
Your Highness,
He said, kneeling on one knee. Krang nodded.
You've worked hard.
I will accept my punishment later and seek forgiveness in due time.
You did what you had to do, not because you're on my side. You performed your duty.
Krang said this and sent him off, and that wasn't the end. Most of those who approached were favorable to Krang. Enkrid thought this was Krang's true strength. Anyone who got to know him, who spent time with him, ended up recognizing him as a person. It was as if Krang had the ability to pull people's hearts toward him. As they walked, they saw a female knight with orange hair, clutching her side with one hand. Her broken nose had altered her appearance strangely. She limped, clearly in terrible shape. As she approached, she stopped and raised her head.
Enkrid.
Her eyes were focused solely on Enkrid, not on Krang. A gaze directed entirely at him. Enkrid knew she had survived. At the same time, he realized that today had come to an end. Had the ferryman said this would be interesting, he had to admit. It was. He had saved the person he wanted to save. For that alone, Enkrid was satisfied. His chest felt a strange tickle, seeing Asia alive and moving, breathing through her mouth since her nose was broken.
Did you sleep well?
He asked, packing all his feelings into those words. Asia chuckled, but then clutched her side. It wasn't an injury that would heal in just a day or two.
Do you know each other?
Krang asked from the side. It was time to explain that she had opposed him and sided with the enemy but had her reasons. Enkrid opened his mouth.
Junior Knight fights well, just a little worse than me.
At that, Asia's eyes narrowed slightly, and Krang found that explanation sufficient.
You should focus on healing your injuries.
Huh?
There's a civil war coming.
Krang said with a smile. He spoke as casually as if suggesting they have a meal together, as if there wasn't the slightest hint of crisis. But Krang was right. It was the start of the civil war. The Count had chosen to settle the matter with war. What had he prepared exactly? Enkrid found himself oddly looking forward to it. Whatever it was, he wanted to cut, slash, and stab his way through and then see the Count's face. Threatening the border guard? Messing with Esther? There wasn't a single thing he liked about that bastard.
I am a sinner.
Asia had to admit her wrongs. Even if Enkrid shielded her and said nothing, what she had done wouldn't just disappear. She didn't believe that her sins would vanish simply because her sister had been taken hostage. It was all just excuses and justification. At least that's how Asia saw it, and that made her a sinner. Krang's response to her confession was simple.
How about covering your wrongs with merits? As I said, we're in such a tight spot we'd even borrow a cat's paw if we could.
It was said casually, without much weight. Was it because the situation was so urgent that there was no other choice? It felt like Krang's attitude was almost too nonchalant. Was it that anyone would do as long as they were needed? No, that didn't seem to be it. She sensed something like trust directed at her. Could he really trust someone who had been on the side of betrayal just half a day ago? She didn't even feel the gazes of the two marquises watching over them. Asia opened her mouth.
How can you trust me?
She couldn't understand Krang's attitude. Was it because of the Red Cape Knights? Was he truly so desperate for help? Did he need one of the few remaining forces loyal to the palace? Was it because she was a junior knight? Asia looked at Krang, and Krang smiled lightly as he looked at her.
I trust this friend's eyes. That's enough for me.
Krang pointed a finger at someone as he said this, and that was the end of it. The person he pointed to, the one called this friend, was Enkrid.
There's a mountain of things to deal with right now. I'll see you later.
With that, Krang left and Enkrid asked in his wake.
Should I fix your nose?
He didn't seem concerned at all about her betrayal.
I already did.
She looked Enkrid straight in the eye and thought to herself.
Does he know me that well?
They had spent some time together, but it hadn't been long. She didn't think he truly understood why she was standing here. She didn't want to explain that she had no choice but to stand in his way to protect her sister.
We'll talk later.
That was all she could say. After that, she had to move quickly because her sister's safety was her top priority. Fortunately, her sister was unharmed. Though she moved fast, Asia's face was still a mess. Her nose was swollen, and her face was covered in purple bruises. On top of that, every time she ran, the pain in her chest flared, and she had to clutch her side to keep going. In that state, Asia explained the situation to her sister.
I owe a debt of gratitude.
That was the conclusion she came to after rescuing her sister and making it back here. No matter what underlined it all, the other party had shielded her and trusted her. Not everything had ended well, but for Asia, things had turned out as well as they possibly could.
Getting your face smashed like that is a debt of gratitude?
Her sister asked. Though she had been kidnapped, frightened, and even despairing, she now appeared fine, at least on the surface. It was a calmness meant to keep Asia from worrying. She was grateful for that.
Yeah,
If he hits you twice, does that mean you should marry him?
I'll think about it.
It was a meaningless joke. Her sister didn't resent her, even after having her life threatened because of her. She had grown up well. Asia could even break her sword if it meant protecting her sister. That's why she didn't regret her choice. If faced with the same situation again, she would still choose her sister. She felt the urge to ask Enkrid. What would he do if she betrayed him again? Somehow she felt the answer would come easily. Though she barely knew him and had only received from him without giving anything in return, she felt as if she already knew what his answer would be.
Just don't let that situation happen again.
That was the right answer. Enkrid truly believed that and was acting accordingly. After rescuing her sister, the sun had set, and she returned home, washed up and tended to her injuries.
I'm grateful for your mercy. I won't get another chance to prove myself by standing on the right side and fighting.
A messenger from the Marquis of Octo delivered the message. She had already planned to do so without needing to be told. She had looked into who was behind the person who had taken her sister hostage. The one who had stepped forward was Viscount Mearns, but who had put him up to it? Her teeth shook, but she clenched her molars tightly. The injuries would heal in less than 2 weeks. If she rested completely, she would be fine. Then, she would beg to be placed on the battlefield. There, she would make her enemies understand who she was and the price they would pay for laying a hand on her sister. Thinking of that moment, Asia stroked her sister's head.
I will definitely get your revenge, Lycanos.
Lycanos was his brother, a companion who had shared the same dream and started the Black Blade Bandits together. They were family in all but blood. It was early dawn, just before sunrise. The surroundings were bathed in a deep blue hue. The man slipped out of the castle and headed toward the northern gate. Getting out of the castle was a hard part. From here, it would be easy. No one would suspect him. The tax collector, the leader of the Black Blades, was already dead.
He was a tool well used till the end.
The man walked quickly, brooding over his revenge. He had a plan as well.
The secret vault.
For over 10 years, wealth had been accumulated there. The man had been the tax collector's servant and the true leader of the Black Blade Bandits. Once, he had taken up the sword alongside Lycanos to defend the oppressed and persecuted. While Lycanos had proven himself through strength, he had led the bandits with conviction and intellect. Of course, every person changes when they are exposed to power and wealth. That change had led him to this moment. That change had led to Lycanos' death. That change left him with nothing but wealth, though realizing that would come far too late.
I will.
He continually repeated the thought of revenge to himself, but deep down he knew it was an impossible dream. How could he, after barely escaping with his life, succeed in what had already failed, despite all the resources and power they had gathered over the years? He knew everything. But the vow of revenge was the perfect justification for his escape. In reality, while Lycanos' death had made him feel a sense of danger, he didn't feel any real sorrow. He was too far removed from who he used to be for that.
As long as I get out of here.
He would likely forget even the vow of revenge. With the treasure hidden in the secret vault, he would flee to another country and live there. Perhaps he would even pose as a noble himself, or maybe he could establish a merchant guild. If neither of those worked, living as a wealthy man in some city wouldn't be a bad option either. His thoughts drifted toward a future filled with possibilities. He shook his head fiercely.
No, I will have my revenge.
He continued to deceive even himself as he walked. The dawn light slowly crept in, and the surrounding blue air was filled with warmth. He walked with his back to the rising sun. He no longer wore the attire of a servant. A dirty cloak, hood pulled up, and hunting gear disguised him as a hunter.
Idiots.
They would never find him. When Jackson had been chasing him, it had felt like he was on the verge of suffocating. The blade had been at his throat. But now?
I made it out alive.
Of course, he didn't intend to simply flee. Until the very end, he had caused as much chaos possible. He had ordered every remaining member of the Black Blade Bandits to set fire to the palace. By now, the flames should be rising. He turned to look back, expecting to see them. But everything was quiet. The diligent citizens were just now waking up, while those who had stayed up through the chaos of the night were still lingering around. Although no battles or brawls had broken out in the city, the area around the castle gate had been in turmoil, and the commotion in the palace had instilled anxiety in everyone's hearts. But there were no flames to crown the night's chaos.
Why?
The doubt was momentary. No, even with doubts lingering, his feet kept moving quickly. He slipped out of the alley and walked briskly until he reached the north gate.
Hold up there.
A soldier, leaning lazily against a side door with a crooked helmet, called out to him. The voice was light and thin, sounding like a woman's.
What is it?
The man responded. The soldier took off her crooked helmet, and long blonde hair fell down. She was a female soldier.
Why do you keep glancing behind you as you walk?
Is that something worth picking a fight over? In a situation like this, where was the commander of the North Gate? Why was there just one soldier here? The leader of the Black Blade Bandits felt a sense of unease. The air was strange, and his heart pounded with a growing sense of danger. Then he looked past the female soldier. A few other soldiers were sitting calmly, dozing off.
Sleeping.
He immediately understood the reason for the strangeness. How could the guards be sitting and sleeping after all the chaos of the previous night?
Sorry, but no fire will be lit.
The female soldier spoke.
Who are you?
Gior's dagger.
She answered, folding her arms, exuding a relaxed confidence that made the man feel even more uneasy. A cold sweat rolled down his back.
You're too late.
She added, casting her gaze behind him. The leader flinched and turned. Standing there was a man with rare, emotionless, reddish-brown eyes. His presence was striking.
Nice to meet you,
The man said. The leader thought the situation was like a ghoul's erection, absurd and grotesque, and he instantly realized he was the erection in this scenario. He cursed his carelessness for not having brought a scroll to escape, but if he had, he wouldn't have made it this far. To avoid detection by the numerous sensing spells in the palace, he couldn't afford to carry such things. All he had now was a single sword. He already knew the man before him wasn't someone he could reason with. He had seen how the tax collector, his own puppet, had been killed. His hands trembled in fear.
You've had your fun so far, haven't you? Now it's my turn to enjoy myself.
Jackson had felt something off when he killed the tax collector. The man who had so meticulously hidden his true identity all this time had fallen so easily. Right then, Enkrid had ordered a cleanup of the palace. A civil war was on the horizon. The first priority before any battle was to clear the surroundings. If a blade flew at your back, you'd lose before the fight even began. Even Krang and the two great marquises had agreed on this. Midway through, Marcus had joined in, speeding up the process. Jackson had also done his part. He was hunting down the remaining stragglers. At that time, a member of the Gior's Dagger Guild, who had been following Jackson, joined him. Jackson had told her there was no need for her to get involved, but she didn't listen.
Master.
The woman spoke. She was Jackson's lover and a member of the Gior's Dagger. The title came naturally to her lips. Of course it did. Jackson was the master of the Gior's Dagger, the most renowned assassination guild on the continent.
Are you going to return once this is over?
She continued. In her judgment, their business here was finished.
We'll talk later,
Jackson replied. For now, the task at hand took priority. Count Molson wasn't all talk. He didn't lie. He had sent his forces to the border guard. Among them were more than 50 lycanthropes, beasts that transformed from humans into wolves. The one leading the charge had killed people and gnawed on their flesh even when he was human. Even back then, he had been at the level of a junior knight, but now he had gained the power of a monster.
Let's go chew on some tender flesh.
He cackled as he led the way.
No one can stop us.
He was certain of victory. No, he went even further than that. He believed that the lycanthrope unit he led would soon become a name synonymous with terror in the region. A bastard when he was human, the man now literally had the head of a beast. He raised his snout to the sky and howled. 50 lycanthropes followed behind him, howling in unison. The howl of monsters instilled fear in humans. It was a fear engraved deep within their instincts. But the soldiers lined up in front of the border guard's gate remained unfazed. Any task, when repeated, dulls the senses. The border guard reserve had fought relentlessly. Aspen forces, monsters, cultists, territorial armies. The list went on. A variety of enemies had relentlessly targeted the border guard. There had been no rest, either from within or from outside. When cultists attacked one side of the gate, Aspen forces would strike the other. The soldiers who survived such experiences were what remained of the reserve unit. Their hearts were now hardened, and the city itself had grown more resilient. In the past, even the mere rumor of battle would have stopped the merchants in their tracks. Supplies would have dwindled, and fear would have spread.
Do they not trust us, or do they wish for our deaths?
Now, at the center of logistics for the border guard stood the Rockfried Merchant Guild. As soon as the guild's merchants became aware of the enemy's invasion, they secured supply routes for food and other essential materials. Many were there to offer assistance. Of course, Count Molson had tried to isolate the border guard, putting pressure on nearby nobles and cities. The warning was clear. If you help them, you're next. Even so, the city of Martai and others that Enkrid had saved from the Knoll colony came to their aid. Moreover, the reputation that the Rockfried Guild had built was not insignificant. As a result, the city itself didn't feel as hostile as it once did. In short, much had changed from before. Standing atop the wall watching the 50 lycanthropes charge, Christ suddenly felt the urge to pee.
Oh, this is terrifying.
But despite his fear, he knew what had to be done. If they lost the first battle, even the limited support they had would vanish. That wouldn't be good.
The side that strikes first wins.
The enemy was a high-ranking noble responsible for the entire region. Count Molson, the so-called king of the frontier.
If it comes to it, we'll take hostages.
Christ muttered under his breath, only loud enough for himself to hear. If things went south, he was prepared to do just that. They were already keeping a close watch on Count Molson's 2 children. In fact, they had been watching them for a while, just in case. You never knew when or how they might prove useful. Even with that, Christ didn't expect the hostages to hold much leverage. Hostages against Count Molson? Not a chance. But he couldn't just leave them be either. If things went wrong, he already had 36 ways to escape. Before he even got to those, though, he had 170 strategies to win and hold his ground. The first move, the most useful, rational, and efficient of all, was this.
Will it work?
Vengeance, now in charge of the archers atop the wall, asked from beside him. Kreis, observing the massive figure ahead, standing 2 heads taller than the other soldiers, replied.
What do you think is the first thing to consider in strategy, tactics, and warfare?
Vengeance thought for a moment before answering.
Morale?
Morale was indeed crucial in warfare, but there was something even more fundamental to consider.
Knowing what you have at your disposal.
It might have sounded vague, but in truth it was a simple statement. The first step was to properly understand and utilize what you already had. How could you fight if you didn't even know what you possessed? Kreis knew Auden. He didn't know everything about him, but he knew enough to be certain that Auden wasn't the type to back down from just 50 lycanthropes, and with him was Teresa, part of the giant siblings. That's why he had ordered not to shoot a single arrow. It had to be that way. They needed to crush the enemy's pride in this first battle. Only then would Count Molson give up on this place. Kreis had finished his calculations, and as a result, Auden at the front lines was already raising his fist toward a lycanthrope that was drooling as it charged at him. The name of the man who became a lycanthrope was Ronald. Even as a human, Ronald was a deviant who took pleasure in killing and dismembering people.
It's fun.
Moreover, he didn't deny that he enjoyed what he did, so it was only natural that it would end this way. Ronald was hunted by bounty hunters and cornered to the brink of death. It was then that he met Count Molson and received the power of a beast. Ronald considered that to be his stroke of luck. The power of the beast surged through his arms and legs. His pounding heart pumped blood throughout his body. He was overflowing with strength, so much that he had to do something. Tear someone apart, devour their insides, drink their blood and crush their bones between his teeth. His desires surged and boiled over. It showed in his eyes.
Coo-hoo-hoo.
His laughter mixed with a howl. Unable to hold back, he let out a crazed scream. Ahead of him, a group of soldiers stood, pretending not to be terrified. In front of them stood a hulking figure, raising an arm and stretching it backward. With his sharp fangs, he could tear through anything. He would chew them to pieces, and once he got into the city, he would hunt down the terrified, hiding children, picking out young girls to kill and feast on.
Key hit.
As he swallowed his anticipation and raised his claws to charge, something happened. A gust of wind struck his face. It was too fast for him to react. Ronald's strength had doubled and his speed had increased, but to Auden, it was all the same. It was as if 2 speeding carriages had collided. In the midst of the lycanthrope's howls, a deafening crash echoed. Ronald's head shattered into fragments, scattering everywhere. Auden stood with his left hand open, like a blade, and his right hand stretched out, frozen in the motion of a punch. From the spiked leather gauntlet on his right hand, dark red liquid dripped. The reason he usually used a club was to avoid using his fists. But now, things had changed.
If we can't stop them, it's the end.
Hadn't Kreis said that? Behind him, everyone in the city of the border guard would be dead. There was no reason to show mercy. Their enemies were a degenerate group of humans who had chosen to live as beasts. The Lord had said, if a human forsakes their humanity, the only place for them is by the Lord's side. Seek forgiveness at the Lord's side. Be judged at the Lord's side. Those were the words written in the Holy Scripture.
My left hand is a blade and my right hand is a rock.
Auden muttered. He moved from his frozen stance and continued speaking as if in a chant.
My father has commanded me not to place mercy in either hand.
The pack of lycanthropes, drunk on their bloodlust, charged forward, having forgotten fear. They had lost their human reason. Even though their leader had been smashed into a bloody pulp, they were too consumed by their beastly instincts to register it. Auden moved forward to block their path. Each step he took struck the ground like the march of an unstoppable war machine, breaking through whatever stood in his way. He advanced, unwavering.
Once they were human.
He prayed as he slashed down with his left hand. His left hand was a blade. As his hand cut diagonally, the lycanthrope wearing an eye patch had its head severed along the path of his strike. Blood sprayed out. Even though it was dead, the momentum of its charge carried it forward, collapsing onto Auden. Auden pivoted slightly on his left foot, dodging the headless lycanthrope, which skidded across the ground. Before the body had even come to a halt, there was another loud crash. Auden's right hand had struck the chest of the lycanthrope that was charging behind the first one. Where his fist had hit, a mixture of innards, bones, and flesh exploded outward in a radial pattern. A gaping hole, impossible to believe was made by a human fist, remained where his punch had landed.
Now that they have become beasts, let their sins be known and judged.
Before Auden finished his prayer, his left hand slashed 3 times, and his right hand struck 4 times. In that moment, parts of 3 lycanthropes' bodies were severed, and 4 others were crushed. As he completed his prayer, a husky voice joined him from his left.
Forgiveness and judgment belong to the Lord.
It was Teresa, holding her shield horizontally as she continued the prayer. She pulled her left hand back and then thrust it forward. Her shield flew through the air with a whoosh. It wasn't faster than an arrow, but for a large shield that covered half of Teresa's body, it moved with astonishing speed. The edge of the shield sliced through the waist of the lycanthrope standing in front. With its sharpened edge combined with Teresa's strength, the shield was as deadly as any sword. As she pulled the cord attached to the shield, it flew back into Teresa's hand with a thump. During that time, another lycanthrope had charged at her from the side, but even while retrieving her shield, Teresa slammed the flat of her sword into the top of the creature's head. The strength of the half-blood giant exploded onto the lycanthrope's head. With a crushing sound, the skull shattered, and severed tongues and broken teeth flew out, soaked in red. From the pulverized head, dark red blood gushed out like a stream. Several people, including the new commander in charge of the Turtle Heavy Infantry, witnessed this. Even though they knew what to expect, they were still shocked. Is that human? It was the first time they'd seen Auden fight with full force. Could a human really do that with just their hands? The gauntlets on both his hands had burst and broken, but that didn't stop him from swinging his right fist and left hand. He was like a living crusher. The lycanthrope pack that had been charging was shredded in an instant. They were sliced, crushed, and smashed, as if they had become moving chunks of meat. Beside him, Teresa moved with her shield and sword. A group of 50 lycanthropes would have been a significant threat to most cities, but that menace was torn apart, broken, and shattered by the hands of just 2 people. One of the reserve unit commanders, who had been watching, shook his head from side to side and shouted loudly,
All units, charge forward.
Attack when the tide of battle turns in your favor. It was a command that had come from above. The messenger, Big Eyes, had emphasized it to the point of almost making their ears bleed.
Whatever you see, don't be surprised. Just keep moving forward without breaking formation. What if the enemy retreats? Maintain the formation. That's the key. We can chase them afterward.
Christ, that madman, had way too much to say, but despite his constant talking, the commander adhered to the orders. After all, everything had been approved by Lord Graham. More importantly, this was about defending the city they had all grown up in. Most of the soldiers at the front lines were people for whom the border guard was both their home and their livelihood. Christ had deliberately sent out only those individuals. The troops advanced steadily without breaking formation. It was a testament to their excellent training. Naturally, the commander leading Count Molson's forces noticed this. What kind of battle starts with punches and ends with a charge without a single arrow fired?
What is this?
This was far outside the realm of his understanding. The man sent by the Count wasn't a brilliant commander, but he was competent enough to do his job. Here, he made the best choice he could.
Retreat, fall back.
Their prepared strategy had crumbled, so they needed to regroup. He pulled his forces back and fled, exactly as Christ had intended. That was as far as it would go. Pressing harder to deal a fatal blow, no chance. Only a fraction of the forces Count Molson had prepared had come here, so all they needed to do was buy time. As he watched the retreating enemy, Christ thought to himself,
You need to understand what's going on, right?
had the Count already taken over the royal palace? That couldn't be it. If that were the case, there would be no need to attack the border guard. This was more of a sudden raid.
If I had taken the royal palace, I'd demand their oath of loyalty first.
Doing so while surrounding them would make it an even more efficient proposal. The best offer is the one that leaves the other party with no choices, but the enemy hadn't done that.
So this is retaliation.
Who was the target of this retaliation? There was no need for deep thinking here. Whose city could be connected to the Count? Lord Graham? He had merely gritted his teeth and declared that he would defend the city. But Chryse had intuition and a feeling.
Could it be that the commander is involved?
It was a small doubt, but one he was almost certain of. In this world, there's no such thing as absolutes, so he couldn't be entirely sure, but the probability was quite high.
This is going to be a headache.
It was clear, just by looking at the situation, civil war, a conflict. And what had the Count sent as his force? 50 lycanthropes. Humans suddenly transformed into wolves. If you didn't feel like you were about to wet yourself at the sight, you weren't human. That's why, by Chryse standards, a few people, including Enkrid, weren't human, they were monsters. He figured that if they saw a pack like this, rather than being scared, they'd probably get excited and charge right in. If not that, they'd simply kill anyone who bothered to attack them out of annoyance. In any case, the Count had revealed a dangerous force. Why would he do that? Because this wasn't his trump card. In other words,
this isn't the end of it.
Chryse had seen people turn from human to beast before. During his encounters with the Black Blade bandits, he knew. The force itself was practically a declaration that Count Molson was behind all this.
And the Count's forces are well trained too.
Even if they weren't exactly shoulder to shoulder with the lycanthropes, they had charged together without hesitation. Shouldn't that have caused some shock? But despite everything, they retreated calmly. Their formation hadn't fallen apart. It looked like they had been prepared for this kind of moment. Since Chryse didn't know what they had hidden behind their forces, he held off on the pursuit. No, they must not be chased. His mind knew it, and so did his heart. Fortunately, the enemy troops retreated smoothly.
Giant siblings!
Someone called out the nickname for Audin and Teresa. Audin was quietly shaking the blood from his hands and removing his broken gauntlets. Considering what he had accomplished with his fists, the only damage to his hands were a few scratches. In front of the two, there were more than 49 dead lycanthropes. The remaining dozen or so had managed to run past them, but were stopped by the newly formed spear and shield unit. They didn't panic. They used their spears to maintain distance and hid behind their shields. It was a tactic in which the entire platoon moved as one. It was a small-scale battle formation commonly used by the mercenary kings of the Eastern continent, and it had been introduced by the recently recruited mercenary commander. In this way, the platoon, like a hedgehog, calmly pierced and killed the lycanthropes one by one. While they weren't as powerful as Audin or Teresa, there were plenty of individuals capable of taking down a single lycanthrope on their own. Victory was inevitable. Chryse expected that after this battle, the strength of the border guard would become well known.
Whether it's Aspen or anyone else, they'll be analyzing our forces.
There was no way to block all the eyes and ears watching them, so it wouldn't take long for news to spread that the border guard was no easy target. Would that help in this situation?
Of course it will.
It's obvious that having power is better than not having it. Chryse let out a sigh of relief, and then began to prepare for what was next.
The Count's real target is the royal palace.
It would be ideal for Count Molson to take over the border guard, but now that they had shown him that it wouldn't be easy, predicting that his next move would be toward the royal palace was as simple as taking candy from a child. Therefore, preparations for that must be made here as well. Chryse explained all of this to Graham. Graham nodded.
I will send the fastest bird to the royal palace.
After a battle that started and ended so quickly, Chryse had a gut feeling that a brutal civil war was on the horizon. He didn't know Count Molson completely, but if it were him in the Count's position,
I wouldn't have acted without certainty.
The Count had made his move because he believed he could win. For him, poking at the border guard was probably just a light test.
Seriously, what is our captain up to now?
Chryse muttered to himself, unusually curious about what his captain was doing.
What is this?
He had fallen asleep, and now he was awake. Enkrid stared at an unfamiliar object placed on the boat in front of him. It was a table and a chair. The fairy seemed twice as large as before.
I thought we could have a little chat, you and I.
There were 2 chairs. The ferryman, seated across from him, spoke as he pulled back his hood. Beneath it, Enkrid saw gray, cracked skin like a barren wasteland and violet eyes, just as before. There was no lamp in sight. Instead, the ferryman's 2 eyes glowed with the same light that the lamp once did. There was nothing more to do at the royal palace, and Krang was bound to get busy. So it was time for Enkrid to return as well. Just before parting, Enkrid saw Matthew dragging his leg along, following Krang, only to get harshly scolded and retreating to get treated.
Wouldn't it be better to get treated at the palace?
Seeing Matthew like that, the Marquis of Octo asked Enkrid, who was on his way back. He was a person who knew how to take care of others meticulously and attentively, and he had a discerning eye. If not, he wouldn't have sided with Krang.
I'm fine.
Enkrid declined. His right wrist would heal soon enough. With proper rest and food, it would be fine. There was no need to do that within the palace. He could set the joint that was creaking with his own hands, and both Rem and Ragna knew enough basic first aid. Above all, there was Esther.
If my hands touch it, you'll be better in no time.
Didn't she say that confidently? She had said that while examining Enkrid's body right after that thing, the Count Molson's clone or whatever it was had died.
If you were someone who would die from something like this, you'd have been dead long ago,
she added. She said that with a satisfied expression. Enkrid didn't know what she meant, but he didn't bother to ask. She likely wouldn't have answered, and Enkrid was quite exhausted, though not on the verge of collapse. After surviving several incidents today, beating up Asia, escaping death from the hands of a junior knight, and then watching Krang and Count Molson argue, he was weary. The things that had happened in between were too many to recount without getting a sore mouth. To put it simply, he had fought, killed, and ran. His legs weren't trembling, but he did want a good meal, a bath, and some rest. His body reeked of blood and sweat, a horrible stench. As he stepped outside, he saw Rem chasing after some fool. Right in front of the palace, beside the odd-eyed horse, Rem looked like he had bathed in blood, his body covered in it. As Enkrid scanned Rem's body with his eyes, Rem spoke up.
Yeah, I beat up and chased down some bastard who ran off.
There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. On closer inspection, it seemed like his body was slightly off balance. He had hurt his ankle. He wasn't limping, but he was injured.
The bastard had a hidden trick up his sleeve at the last moment.
Without being asked, Rem added. Even as he spoke, he wasn't smiling. It didn't seem like he felt any relief. It looked like there was some connection with the person he was chasing. He even looked somewhat like a Westerner.
Are you getting beat up because you lack skill?
Ragna asked seriously from behind. It sounded almost concerned, which meant it was mocking. At that, Rem finally smiled, though it was far from a smile of joy or happiness.
You'll get yourself killed one day.
Huh? Can't hear that from someone who just got beat up. Want me to split your ear open with an axe? Can't hear that from someone who hurt their ankle. Oh yeah? I guess I'll have to use this on you.
Rem said as he reached for something in his coat. Enkrid stepped in between the two.
That's enough.
This was a daily occurrence, though it did seem like both had grown more talkative. When did those two get so good at talking? At first, it seemed like both of them would throw punches before they'd even say a word. He remembered Ragna, who had once bitten into an apple and wandered aimlessly, and Rem, who would approach silently, sharpening his axe blade on a whetstone.
You two sure have gotten talkative.
As he said that,
You're the last person who should be saying that,
Rem retorted. Ragna blinked a few times and added,
What are you even talking about?
On their way back, Enkrid mentioned how Ragna had really taken a shortcut. Upon hearing that, Rem was genuinely surprised. It was a shift in perspective, calling a non-path a path, and cutting straight through by focusing only on the palace meant it was indeed a shortcut.
You really have improved.
Rem was impressed, and Ragna raised his chin slightly.
Finding shortcuts is my specialty. I'm better at that than swordsmanship.
You insane bastard.
And then they fought again. After roughly breaking them up, they arrived at Andrew's house, where they saw Dunbachel, Andrew, and several trainees gathered. No one was dead.
What's up? You suddenly ran off.
Dunchel spoke to Ragna, which meant they had to hear about the shortcut again. Had finding a path been more rewarding than killing the junior knight of the order? To Enkrid, it seemed that way. Even Dunbachel was more surprised that he had found a path. Dunbachel wasn't interested in what happened within the palace anyway. She just nodded with a tired look. Around that time, Jackson returned. He gave a nod to acknowledge his return, and then acted as usual. In other words, he remained silent.
What happened?
It went well.
At least Jackson answered when Enkrid asked.
Curious about the shortcut to the palace?
Ragna addressed him, but Jackson ignored it. Enkrid, with the help of the attendants and maids, washed up, set the bone in his right wrist, and applied a splint. When he came out, Esther, in her human form, approached and took hold of his wrist. A considerable amount of heat radiated from her touch.
Endure it,
she said, and Enkrid did as she instructed. As he endured the heat, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. There's nothing more important than proper rest, they said. Good food and rest are the path to regeneration. It's the royal road to quick recovery. Enkrid shared a room with Rem. Without much exchange of words, they fell asleep. He instinctively knew that he would sleep deeply, so much so that he wouldn't even dream. That's why he was a bit startled. Because right away there was a dream. A ferryman, a black river, and a small boat appeared.
Sit,
the ferryman said. The boat was now several times wider than before. Could it change this much? The table and chairs looked as though they were carved from solid wood, connected directly to the floor of the boat. It looked as if they had grown out of the floor. Was that impressive? Yes, it was. It was indeed impressive. But that was all. He was slightly surprised, and there was a small sense of admiration.
Oh, it can do that.
The boat still swayed, the ferryman was still there, and the black river remained unchanged. Though the size of the boat had changed, it didn't feel like a huge difference. What stood out more was the ferryman's demeanor. There was no tea, but the presence of the table indicated something. It meant they could have a conversation. The ferryman sat first, across from him. Enkrid walked a few steps across the now wider boat and sat in the chair. It was hard. Even after thinking twice, it wasn't a comfortable seat.
For giants, it's great strength. For frogs, regenerative power. Beastmen have superior control over their physical bodies. Dwarves are gifted with craftsmanship and endurance. And for dragons, it's said they are born with exceptional combat sense and a tongue of will.
Most people would struggle to understand such talk, but Enkrid grasped most of it. There was a time when he pondered talent, striving through effort, trying his hand at everything. During those times, he believed theory was necessary and delved into various things. Of course, it wasn't of much use. That's why he knew this story. The giant's strength, the frog's regeneration, the beastman's athletic prowess, the dwarf's stamina, the dragon's power of speech.
And what about humans?
At the end of the tale, the ferryman posed a question. Enkrid knew the answer.
Potential and possibility. Correct.
From the ferryman's black eyes, a purple light shone, casting a gentle glow over the table and the surrounding area, replacing what a lamp would do. No, at some point a lamp had appeared on the table.
Humans can go anywhere.
Was that the point he wanted to make? The ferryman continued.
And because of that, they don't know their place.
Their eyes met. The ferryman now recognized Enkrid's growth. Once this boy couldn't even hear him properly. Now he met his gaze. Now they could converse.
This is, let's say, my gift, my advice, and the result of my whim.
When Enkrid remained silent, the ferryman went on. He raised his right hand, palm open, and placed it in front of Enkrid's eyes. Just that movement gave Enkrid the impression that a huge wall had sprung up before him. In reality, it was only a hand with skin like gray pebbles, but the sensation felt entirely different. Then, the ferryman's voice overlapped and echoed as dozens of words stabbed into Enkrid's mind one by one.
It's impossible. You can't escape. Where do you think you can go from here? If you believe you can always move forward as you do now, that's arrogance. That is the arrogance of potential and possibility. Humans are arrogant. Give up. This is my mercy. Greater suffering will come. The wall will grow taller. You can stop here.
With the ferryman's words, Enkrid saw a vision. In the vision, he saw himself writhing in pain. Unable to find direction, he wandered alone, lost. For a lifetime, he repeated this suffering. Today had no end. There were no people, and there wasn't even a small change in this endless today. That today repeated infinitely. To not fall into despair was beyond human capacity. The moment he saw this, his entire body shuddered. Fear surged within him. The terror filling his chest swallowed him whole. Other visions followed. In them, Enkrid lost everyone, every time. Everyone around him died. He couldn't stop it. His hands couldn't reach them. Something beyond human power killed everything around him, and yet he could do nothing. Missing his legs and arms, he could only watch. The visions continued. A massive fireball fell from the sky above. The fireball burned everything. His body, his will, the ground, the air. But even then, he didn't die quickly. In the flames, Enkrid suffocated and perished. Just by seeing it, he knew. That kind of pain wasn't something anyone could endure. All of it was beyond what a sword could solve.
Stop here. Whatever today brings, you will live in contentment.
Was this persuasion? Or was it, as the ferryman said, advice, a whim, and a gift? Enkrid didn't know, but even if it was a gift, it wouldn't change anything. He was the kind of person who could reject a gift if it was something he didn't want. That was the kind of human Enkrid was.
If I get lost, I'll keep searching until I find my way.
Finally, he opened his mouth to speak. His first words flowed into the next.
If I have no arms or legs, I'll bite the grip of my sword. If I can't avoid it, I'll cut it open.
Disasters cannot be avoided, so he would become the disaster himself. Enkrid declared that, no matter what, he would keep moving forward. The unknown threat didn't matter as much as the present. He wouldn't cower and kneel in fear ahead of time. As he had done so far, he would do again. The ferryman said nothing more. He simply watched. Suddenly the chair disappeared. Enkrid fell to the ground with a thud. If this had been reality, he would have instinctively flexed his thigh muscles to catch himself. But here that didn't happen. The table and chair vanished, and the ferryman, now with his hood pulled over his face, was no longer visible. He held a lamp in one hand and spoke.
How dare you sit at the same table? You've overstepped.
I didn't ask to sit down.
It felt a little unfair.
Go.
The ferryman spoke, and Enkrid opened his eyes again. It was reality. It would have been nice to forget such a dream, but he couldn't. The vision lingered in his mind, etched into his memory. A day that was beyond his control, so now it was the present. Repeating a safe and comfortable today would be the best way to protect himself and ensure his safety.
Did you have a good dream?
Sometimes, Rem would ask about dreams in the morning, and at moments like this it felt as if the bastard had some kind of innate instinct, like the primal instincts of a barbarian.
Yeah.
As Enkrid responded, he sat up in bed. Lowering his head and catching his breath, Rem spoke again.
You were drenched in cold sweat, even talking in your sleep.
What did I say?
You said if that were the case, I wouldn't have held a sword in the first place.
It was something from deep within. Words that slipped out unconsciously. A life of safety and protection.
If that were the case, I wouldn't have held a sword.
Enkrid muttered. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto his thigh. Those words were directed not only at the ferryman, but also at himself as a declaration of resolve.
No, Captain. No matter what happens, you would have held a sword.
Rem said. He was right, too. Enkrid stood up. It was early morning, just before dawn.
In our land, we call this time Udkiora.
A word from the west.
What does it mean?
It means just before a newly hatched chick takes flight.
What?
It's also called the dark morning.
The moment before dawn, the dark morning, just before the sun rises.
When the dark morning passes, it's only natural for the sun to rise.
Rem muttered, almost like reciting a poem. Enkrid found that word appealing, the dark morning. The darkness before the sun rises. It seemed like the perfect term for a good training time. It was time to move his body. Krang would handle his own business. Enkrid, too, intended to handle his own, namely, training and drills. While Enkrid was going through his usual training, word came that Count Molson had declared himself king.
The Nauril Plains in 1 month.
It was late morning. The one delivering the message was Asia. A bruise still lingered near her nose. Rem, upon seeing this, paused mid-yawn and spoke.
Where did you get hit like that? Who did it? Tell me. I'll pay them back. I'll split their face in 2.
Of course it was a joke. He didn't mean it, and it was half teasing.
That guy.
Asia pointed at Enkrid. Enkrid hadn't mentioned the incident when she blocked his path.
Captain?
Could Enkrid's skills be enough to beat Asia up like that? No way. Rem turned his gaze to Enkrid.
Pick up your axe. I'll give you a chance to avenge the lady.
Enkrid said.
Who's the lady?
Asia interjected, but Rem was quick to play along.
Let's do it. Breaking the face of a wrist-injured fool is no big deal. Are your ribs all healed?
They weren't fully healed. Enkrid had thought about it yesterday, but once again he was struck by how much Rem's wit had grown. It was remarkable progress, and even during a short sparring session, Rem was astonished once again.
Again.
It was something he had witnessed often. Rapid progress, a drastically changed sword in just one day. Could it be called talent? No, it was as if Rem alone lived in a different time. His sword was like a sculpture, carefully chiseled away piece by piece. A sword built like a tower, with layer upon layer added.
Are you living a different day from the rest of us?
Sometimes Enkrid was amazed by Rem's instincts, from the dream that morning to this moment.
Exactly.
Enkrid gave a simple reply, not that Rem would believe him anyway.
Did we go too far?
The ferryman asked.
It was fickle.
The ferryman answered.
It was madness. What was so pretty about it that it provided some amusement? It was just for a moment.
The ferryman spoke again.
Wasn't that the thing that was yet to come?
Again, the ferryman asked.
Humans are creatures of potential and possibility, and for that reason they are arrogant. He will be the same, won't he? Who knows? Just as it was amusing, the things to come could change as well. If he ends up trapped, then that's as far as it goes.
It was a solitary question and answer session, with no one there to listen. Krang held the first strategic meeting at the Royal Palace's training ground. A small platform was set up, and the royal guard was stationed around it. Among them, a group of nobles gathered first. Whenever people gather, talk is bound to arise. One among them, who had overheard various rumors, started to speak.
I heard 50 lycanthropes appeared before the border guard. Count Molson is said to be a sorcerer. Who knows what more might come out of his territory?
Ha! It's dangerous. We barely stopped them, barely.
They say not only the lycanthropes, but also the creatures that once shook the capital were his doing. Is that all? There's talk that the incident in the palace, with Viscount Mearns at its center, was also the Count's handiwork.
Krang didn't try to control the information. In fact, he spread it further. Everyone knew the full details of the incident.
They're saying we have to fight without calling back a single knight stationed outside. Does that even make sense? At least one knight from the Red Cape Knights should come. This isn't going to turn into a hopeless battle, is it?
One of the younger nobles, who had inherited his title, crossed the line, blurting out the words unconsciously due to his anxiety. Even though they stood with Krang, not all shared the same heart. When anxiety spreads, trust can waver. That was the state of things now. It was a group of landed nobles, junior nobles, heads of the trade guilds in the capital, and guild masters.
How dare you? Can you not even trust the lord you've chosen to serve?
Two nobles who had been watching sternly rebuked him, prompting the one who had first spoken to open his mouth again.
Just scolding each other won't help. We need to assess the situation and judge accordingly. If all we do is blindly trust, we might as well go to the temple over there and just pray. Don't you think?
Baron Zeppel, what exactly are you trying to say?
At that, the man known as Baron Zeppel responded immediately.
Let's face reality and do what needs to be done.
Are you suggesting betrayal?
The one who raised the question seemed ready to strike at any moment. Since the training ground had been chosen as the meeting place, everyone was armed. Several non-nobles frowned. Is this all right? Who knows how long this civil war will last? Are we really on the right side with people like this?
Are you looking for blood, Baron Rudin?
The titles they used to address each other were cold. They weren't sworn enemies, but they had clashed before over a nearby mining vein as their territories were adjacent. There was no way they could get along. Aside from their small quarrel, the anxiety among them grew. The closer a noble was to Count Molson's territory, the stronger this tendency was. What if a colony of monsters suddenly attacked? What would happen to their land? Even losing a single city would result in catastrophic losses. Even if this was a civil war, should they risk everything they had? And if they lost, or even if they won, would there be anything left? If a territorial war broke out afterward, whose side would the king take, the side that fought better, or the side that was more useful at the time? This was a common concern, not only for the nobles, but also for the guild masters and artisans. Everyone here had a lot to consider politically. Yet they were people of courage and determination. After all, hadn't they all turned their backs on Count Molson? Of course, some among them had no choice but to oppose the Count. For example, there were those who had lost entire trading companies, passed down through generations, because the Count, in the name of business, had consumed the surrounding markets. Others had lost half their territory because they had to pay an outrageous protection fee to fend off monster attacks orchestrated by the Count. Such people would grit their teeth whenever Molson's name was mentioned.
Humans becoming monsters. No, more like they're harboring a pack of monsters from the start. How could we consider such a person to be human like us?
One of them raised that point. He was a master of one of the artisan guilds. They took pride in crafting weapons for humans, so such a statement made sense. More than 20 people had gathered. Notable high-ranking nobles, like Markazar or Marka Octo, had yet to arrive. More precisely, both were at Krang's side. They were in a small building at the back of the training ground, in a musty barracks that smelled of sweat.
Not everyone will be of the same mind.
But we can't consider them enemies either.
The two marquises spoke in turn, those who had aligned themselves with the prevailing winds, those who stood with Krang but were not willing to risk everything, and others who each carried their own bundle of thoughts. Nevertheless, they were necessary. At this moment it was hard to even gauge the extent of the power Count Molson was hiding. So if even ghouls stood on their side, they had no choice but to turn a blind eye and accept it for the time being. In fact, that was exactly what the Count was doing.
A sorcerer, they said.
Visser seemed to frown, as if lines were forming on his forehead. Whatever Count Molson had done, these beings, whether human or monster, were on his side. How that was possible didn't matter right now, and perhaps it never would. What mattered now was fighting and winning.
You need to look at the long term.
The Marquis of Octo added his words. His power came from the land. If not for that, he wouldn't have earned the title Octo as his moniker. The longer the war dragged on, the one who would suffer the most was the Marquis of Octo. If battles erupted everywhere, could farmland still be properly maintained? And yet he was saying the war shouldn't be short. In order to win, they had to sap Count Molson's strength. He was likely also calculating that if they dragged it out long enough, the Knight Orders might intervene on their own.
Did you say you declined the Knight's involvement? You shouldn't have done that.
He spoke with blunt honesty. He believed that in order to win, one should not be picky about the methods or means used, and he wasn't wrong. To all of this, Krang simply responded with a faint smile. The weather was pleasant, with warm sunshine. Summer would soon arrive. Wasn't this the time when the sounds of insects grew noticeably louder?
The weather is nice,
Krang said. As Marcus arrived late, he noticed the tense expressions of the two marquises and asked,
"Did you exchange some harsh words?"
Marcus could be considered a loyalist. If the two marquises had joined based on conditions, or because they couldn't tolerate the opposition, Marcus had put everything on Krang as a person.
Your manners are slipping, Marcus.
Since when have you cared about my manners?
Marcus replied to the Marquis's comment, standing by his lord's side.
You'll finish this in one go, won't you?
He asked naturally.
That's the plan. I don't have the guts to do it twice.
Krang answered.
Oh, you don't have the guts, so you'll do it in one go? What a remark to toy with those who truly lack courage.
Marcus joked.
What do you mean, finish this in one go?
It was the Marquis of Visar who spoke, a seasoned politician who never showed surprise. But he couldn't just let this comment pass. It implied that everything would be decided in a single battle.
If we drag this civil war out, what will be left of this land?
Krang asked, still smiling.
If we don't win the civil war, we'll lose everything we hold in our hands.
It was a reasonable statement.
Then we just have to win.
Do you think it'll be easy to win with a rabble like that?
Are you underestimating the Count's power?
Neither. We'll do everything we can, and the rest is up to whether the goddess of luck smiles upon us.
We must make sure that doesn't happen.
Victory, even if it sickens the country.
Krang inwardly shook his head. That didn't mean he couldn't understand the two before him. If you don't win, you lose. That's how they viewed the battle. But Krang saw further than that.
Winning isn't the end.
Count Molson would also aim to finish the fight in a single battle. This was entirely logical to the two marquises. If they desired the throne and wanted it to still be called the king's seat afterward, this is what they had to do. A beast couldn't afford to be devoured by jackals after the fight. There were still many enemies, Rehenstetten in the south, Aspen in the east, and the ongoing threat of the demon realm was ever present. Thus, with the strength they had now, they had to finish it in one go.
Broader and bigger.
The threat of the demon realm grows each year, causing us to lose more territory. I don't intend to sit by and watch it happen.
Krang cut through the present and spoke of the future. The two marquises weren't fools. They understood. It was about after the Civil War. Krang was already envisioning the future. The two marquises fell silent.
My heart is too narrow to fully grasp your grand vision.
Then Marcus, standing behind Krang, threw out a comment that was almost a joke. It was an old proverb. It sounded half like mockery, but in truth, the message was that if understanding Krang's intentions was difficult, they might as well trust and follow him. The two marquises, of course, understood. But that didn't mean they let it slide.
That tongue of yours will get you into trouble one day.
I've told him many times, but it seems impossible to fix.
The two marquises criticized Marcus with refined language, and Marcus just smiled, following behind his lord. Krang stepped outside. It was time to meet with the gathered nobles, guild masters, and merchants. Their strength was necessary. Neither justification nor manpower was in abundant supply. Above all, to fight properly, they needed unity. It would be ideal if everyone shared the same intention, but if that was too difficult, they could be bound together by a common focal point. And if that didn't work, they could offer conditions. It was a fresh thought.
Is this an unfavorable fight?
Krang quickly dismissed the self-deprecating question. Since when had he ever fought an easy battle? Just because it was unfavorable didn't mean it was a defeat. There was a man beside him who had turned the impossible into reality. Even if he could only achieve half of what Enkrid had shown, that would be enough. Even if he could only match half of the luck that Enkrid always claimed he had, it would still be good. This was the first step. Standing on the platform, Krang looked over the crowd, basking in the warm sunlight. The murmur of voices naturally quieted.
Did you sleep well?
That was his opening remark. A few words were exchanged. Nobles expressed admiration, thoughts, and concerns. Krang, having listened to it all, calmly raised his hand and lowered it. With that brief gesture, they fell silent.
I believe we will win, don't you?
Confidence in victory? From where?
Baron Zeppel, your light infantry is said to be so swift that no one can catch them in the forest. Is that true?
Zeppel had a ranger unit, raised and trained in the woods. He himself would get up in the middle of the night if there was a hunt to be had.
Yes.
And Baron Rudin, I hear you are a master of spearmanship.
My skills are lacking.
I heard that at one point you dreamed of joining the knights. Was I mistaken?
That was a childhood dream.
His skills were said to surpass those of a squire. Krang smiled faintly.
I think once will be enough, just once.
His voice echoed across the wide training ground, then quickly dissipated. However, Krang's words seemed to linger, as if they continued to float in the air. It was as though they were being etched into their minds. He stood there with his arms at his sides, showing only a faint smile. He didn't appear to be a king, nor did he seem like an exceptional strategist, yet he was someone you felt you could trust. If he had been a conman, he would have been one of the greatest swindlers in history. But he wasn't a conman. He was the next king, and at present, the leader of this group.
How will you fight?
I said we would meet on the plains of Nalril, so that's what we'll do.
It was as casual as saying a friend was coming to visit from the outskirts of the city, and he'd go out to greet them. That calm, composed attitude only inspired more confidence, a belief that victory was certain. There were those who had trusted and followed Krang from the beginning.
I have 50 well-trained spearmen under my command. It's a small number, but please make good use of them.
One noble stepped forward.
My skills may be lacking, but I will stand at the front. I've stocked some provisions, wheat and beans. I'll send them over.
Others began to chime in as well. If you can't dispel anxiety, you can cover it with belief.
Trust me, we will win.
That's what Krang did. Without any grand speech, he had managed to unite those who remained under a single purpose. One battle, that would be enough.
What if Count Molson has other plans?
The Marquis of Octo muttered. He was a genius when it came to internal affairs, but battle was a different matter. War wasn't his area of expertise. Krang, stepping down from the platform, responded to the question.
Count Molson is an ambitious man and he's too clever not to follow through.
A month passed quickly.
But I will keep Night is coming.
In response to his guard and adjutant's question, Count Molson adjusted his armor and replied,
Yes.
Their forces had been prepared with the assumption that the knight orders would intervene. And now, they had to fight without the knights?
Arrogance, that bastard.
Molson, dressed in armor with plates fixed in place, held the magical sword that symbolized his title as Count. Fully armed, he made his declaration.
But I will keep moving forward. I will end the Roy of Nauril.
His forces, encamped on the plains, blew their horn, a signal to come out and fight.